Thank you. The thing is, Shore, that you're saying that we've been in democracy since 1999, and you know very well that we haven't. What we did in 1999 was that we returned to civil rule, and you know, that was ushered in by a process of elections and so on. But I don't think anybody would really mistake that for democracy. Even the winner of the election in 1999 acknowledged that democracy is not an event, it's a process. And the question is, to what extent have we moved forward? Certainly I came into the pro-democracy struggle because I was involved in human rights. And when you get involved in human rights, you realize that the main reason for the abuse is that the system itself encourages abuse. And until you have a democratic and accountable government, you will continue to see those kind of abuses. Now, on one level, one can say that government that is elected by the people, even in a rigged election, is in some way accountable. But the truth is that there are other issues that have been thrown up which have rendered the overall human rights situation probably worse now than it was under the military. And if you forgive me for not being able to say much about it, it's mainly because there's almost a pall of secrecy over events that are happening. First of all, the events that were happening in the Niger Delta when there was an insurgency in the Niger Delta, and even more so with the insurgency of Boko Haram, which is mainly concentrated in the northeast of the country, to the extent that it's not just that a state of emergency has been declared, but that basically the military has carte blanche and has cut off communications and prevented reporters or observers from going in to see what is happening. So we only know about about certain things that happen, for example, the slaughter of school children inside their boarding schools, or the encouragement by the military of vigilante groups which are supposed to hunt out was it Al-Qaeda, are supposed to hunt out Boko Haram, and that recently so many of them were also slaughtered, and so on. So you hear headlines about slaughter here, huge numbers slaughtered there, and so on and so forth, with the occasional terrorist outrage, you know, of a bomb, you know, planted. But you don't hear about the daily life of the people who live there, what they're subjected to, what it means to live under military occupation, to move around, just to drive, for example, from Yola to Maiduguri, the number of checkpoints that you will meet, the way you have to interact with the soldiers, the things that they can say to you, can make you do, the abuses to which you can be subject, simply because, as far as they're concerned, they can deal with you as they like once they label you a suspected terrorist. So that, we only hear about the experience of, you know, our peers, you know, people who are educated, who can have access to the, to let us know through various means, or because they travel in and out. But the people who are living there, who can't open their markets, who are going about on, you know, motorcycle taxis and so on, their lives, we really hardly know about it. We have a National Human Rights Commission, and we are encouraging them, and they have been in. Also, the committee that was set up by the President to discuss amnesty also went in. And from what we get to know, the sheer misery of people's lives under that insurgency and the, you know, state of emergency, subject to what the military, you know, the military say go, you go, the military say come, you come, the military say lie down in the dust, you lie down in the dust, the military say I'm taking you in because you look like a suspect, you get taken in because you look like, all of that we don't really have the real texture of life. Now, I'm living in faraway Lagos, where, you know, the big story is that some destitutes or non-destitutes, according to who you believe, were picked up and taken to Anambra State. And, you know, it's a completely different, it's almost like we could be living on a different planet. You know, in other parts of the country, you have the menacing of kidnapping. Not that it's not there in Lagos too, but again, a lot of the kidnapping that's going on, it's only when you hear of somebody, a famous person like Mike Ozekome, human rights activist, legal practitioner, senior advocate of Nigeria, or when a wife of the Supreme Court judge is kidnapped, then you know that it's a menace that is going on. But the lives of ordinary people who get kidnapped and just know that they have to settle one way or the other, those we don't hear about. So, you know, and then on top of it, I should say that I personally have been engaged in funeral business for the past 6 weeks or 7 weeks. And so I haven't even really, I've only had half an eye cocked to current affairs in Nigeria. But all in all, one would say that when you add those numbers, you can see that the death toll is not diminishing. Yes, some of the atrocities are at the hands of terrorists and insurgents, but we don't even have the numbers for those who die or perish or are incarcerated at the hands of the government. So there's that aspect of it. And unfortunately, one doesn't hear the voice of the elected representatives of those people speaking up, which is what, if we really had a truly functioning democracy, we would be able to do. And that's partly because there's I suppose that there's an extent to which people say, well, what can we do? We don't know how to tackle the Boko Haram menace, as we always in our journalistic cliche call it. If we speak up, we get slaughtered by Boko Haram, so it's best for us to keep quiet. And yet, if you speak up for your ordinary people, then you risk being, you know, tagged as a sympathizer. We only have to remember the reaction to the suggestion by the governor of the central bank that poverty played a part in the root of terrorism in the country. And I don't say that because I agree with him. I think that it's a much bigger story than that, and it's a lot bigger. I mean, I come from Oyo State. I wouldn't say that our allocation from the federal purse is any greater than any other non-oil producing state. So it's not simply whether this state gets money from the federal purse and that state doesn't. To an extent. I mean, I should say, as you mentioned, I'm on the board of the Clean Foundation, and quite early on in the Obasanjo administration, we produced a report which detailed that possibly 10,000 people had died since the return to civilian rule. Now, that book was published in conjunction with the World Organization Against Torture. And we had a launch, and it was, but the book itself was seized at the ports and wasn't allowed to come in. And this was before, you know, Boko Haram. So you can imagine that, of course, in mentioning the different insurgencies, I haven't even mentioned the communal strife in the Plateau state, and the inter-communal strife also in the Ebonyi states and so on. So I think that I think there's an unwillingness to engage with facts and figures. Everybody wants to do anecdotal, I hear that, and people are saying things from positions, so that if you start from the position that the president is a Christian or comes from this area and therefore doesn't care about people from a different religion or from a different area, then anything that he does or says will be seen through that prism. And so I think that we are not even engaging with the issues in a dispassionate way. You know, the president goes and sets up a school for Al-Majiris and so on, but it's the business of the federal government is not to be setting up schools. That's something for the state governments to be doing. But I should say also that one of the things that I was involved in was a project that is run by the Governors Forum, which is the state peer review mechanism. And basically what it's about was that the governors, in the same way that you have the African peer review mechanism to say that, look, don't look to Europe or give yourself excuses about why Malaysia is like this. We're all Africans together here. Why can that African country do it and we can't? It's the same thing at the state level. Why can this state do it and that state can't? And the idea was that instead of giving each other excuses, they would challenge each other. They would review, they would, you know, say what they could do, what they were planning to do. It would be reviewed, and then they would learn from each other, because some states are doing some things well and some states are not. And the education situation in the greater part of the northern part of the country is dire. It's not just a matter of people don't want to send their children to schools because they don't want their children in mixed schools. Then it's up to the state governments to set up single-sex schools. It's not rocket science. If Osun State can come up with the, you know, the tablet form, and then some states are saying, well, we need to teach our children in, you know, English is a difficult language. What stops you from developing the content in Hausa language or any other local language? If you're saying that they're teaching them things which are contrary to our culture and religion, what stops you from developing the content that is in teaching with your culture and your religion? At the end of the day, 2 + 2 is still going to equal 4, whichever language you're going to teach it in. But when you start bringing up these excuses of culture and so on, and at the end of the day, your children don't get taught, and as a result, they don't even have the tools to begin to interrogate their own situation to a level which does not begin to compare with other parts of the country, so that right from the beginning, there's always a gap and a tension which allows everybody to feel superior or inferior, or to feel that that one is not for me anyway. It's as if there's a failure to say that everybody's entitled to the same chance, and that the money that I have, I'm going to put it into making sure that they have that chance. And I think that and the reason why I mentioned the Governors Forum state peer review mechanism was because I think that, of course, the object was to try and review a state at a time when nobody is running for election and so on. Because you want to, and in fact the first 2 states that we did review were Anambra State and Ekiti State. And there were things there that we would say, yes, this is something that other states could learn from. And there were things where we could say, well, just on a purely objective criterion, these things need to be looked at if the state is to make progress. And I think that, so that, for example, in Ekiti State, you have senior citizens being given a pension. And I noticed that Anambra State has also introduced it. Now, I don't know whether that's because they had always planned to do it, but it shows that there are things that can be done to improve the lot of ordinary people. There's a big political issue going on, but there's a point at which the amount of money that people in government extract from the system and waste on nonsense is going to be challenged by people. Now, the hope of democracy is that that will happen. when you're living under a military dictatorship, it's a matter of luck. I know some people will say that, you know, we need a military dictator to come and root out the corruption. We all sat and watched in horror at the, in fact, it's almost as if you can't even take it in, the way that the oil subsidy matter happened and has been allowed to die. No charges are being faced. And you know, when you read that, or I mean, I've started reading El Rufai's book, and the way he was detailing the kind of offers, approaches that would be made to him, the assumptions that would be made. For example, you want to become a minister, you can make 60 million in just a, you know, just one sale. 60 million naira. I mean, even in dollars, it's not a small sum, you know. And you sort of, then you begin to understand why people say, look, we do need Buhari or somebody who everybody will be afraid of, who will not play this game of everybody must chop from this government pot. Because it's not just that, it's the greed with which the amounts that are taken out are mind-boggling. And I think that, so it gets people thinking that maybe we do need a broom to sweep clean. And all I would say to that is that we've had brooms sweeping clean before.
And when?
When the wind blows, because we have not learned to do the sweeping ourselves, they either adopt bad habits or something. So really, it still comes back, I'm afraid, to we the people.
How can we sweep the place clean?
It has to be we, the people, taking the broom in our hand. I don't believe in you know, messiahs coming from outside, or you know, somebody coming and forcing us to behave properly. There are things that still linger. I mean, when Buhari was military dictator in Nigeria, he introduced the queuing culture, and people still maintain it up till today. But beyond that, the pressure, the size of the Nigerian prize is still so great. I mean, we're happy that the United States is no longer dependent on importing oil, but nonetheless, oil is still being sold on the world market, and because there's no sense of ownership, except in a sort of whiny way, oh, it belongs to us in the Niger Delta, give it to us so that we can be idle all day, and, you know, and the whole sort of idea that, well, if it's being stolen by us, so it doesn't matter, you know, that kind of mentality, rather than you see what is being done in other states with less money, and but with a sense of purpose, then you begin to say that we actually, in a way, we would say we don't miss the oil money, except that it has this warping, it warps. We would say that we don't miss the oil money, except that we can say that it distorts the picture and the life for the rest of us. So that, you know, when at Mushing, you go and you buy your akara and you spend 50 naira to buy what will feed you, you'll find that in another part of the country, everything is being discussed in millions. It warps the perception. Well, I personally think that when I consider, let me tell you a story about my church. When we have, well, the first time we had Thanksgiving on the basis of, you know, the church, of course, would want to say that if you have anything to do with this state, you should come forward and give thanks, and I drop some money. And so, you know, if you've ever, for example, if it's Benue State, if you've been to Benue State, or if you eat yam, or you must come and give thanks. So, of course, when it came to giving thanks for Lagos State, they say, if you have anything to do with Lagos State, you know, then you must, and of course we were all there in Lagos State, so actually, so the whole church went forward. Then the people of Lagos State sent a note to the vicar that they want to have a separate Thanksgiving for the real indigenes of Lagos State. So we can slice it and slice it, and we can slice it, we begin to dice it, and we will still be quarreling with our neighbor. You know what they say, at the end of the day, it's every man for himself. I think that our big, and you've seen recently with the alleged deportation to Anambra State, oh, the internet warriors were out in force, throwing ethnic brickbats across at each other, you know, taking care, you know, in case anybody wasn't properly offended, quickly mention Chief Awolowo and all the rest of it. And we can continue picking at those scabs, or we can, you know, we can understand that we have to live together. And unfortunately, the people who have venom to spew are the ones who get the airtime. Those of us who are getting on quietly with our neighbors are not really, you know. So I think that when people examine it, they will say, yes, but what is it that we're going to break up into? You know, the states in the southwest tried to have something called a development agenda for Western Nigeria, but it was clearly aligned to a political party. And when one of the states in southwestern or western Nigeria do not belong to that political party, then what happens to the development agenda, which was a sensible idea in the sense of saying, look, what are we going to do if this oil money is not there for us? How do we develop our states? And that is the kind of thinking that has to go on all over the country. But if we, so I frankly, and I think in any event, we remember that we're within ECOWAS. Nigerians are more in Cameroon than, you know, there's no amount of, even if we split it up, all that we're talking about then is division of the spoils of rent from government. But government cannot live on rent forever. In the end, we are all going to become taxpayers, and we're going to demand accountability from our governments. Well, let me say that everybody thinks of it when it's past. It's like when I look into the mirror now, or sorry, when I look at my photographs of myself as a young woman, I say, I wasn't bad though, but those days have passed. It's when you look back that you see, it wasn't that bad. You didn't know it at the time. So I don't think that we will always have the nostalgia of what went before, you know, and I don't think that there's any point in, because we cannot live in the past. We have to move forward. We have to build. And, you know, when we talk about the condition of the country, if you do a poll, I mean, there was recently the case of that young boy who hid away. Thank God it was just a local flight from Benin to Lagos. He didn't die in the undercarriage of the aircraft. But the reaction of many people was that, well, of course, there was a security issue, which is obviously very serious. But the reaction of many others were that they don't blame him, that, oh, what is here for him, and so on and so forth. Why would he want to stay? And I think we just have to continue to say that the country is not going to be made by people who don't want to stay. But the question is that into what system is the effort that you're putting in going? Is it just being sunk without trace or not? And that's really the issue, I think, for many people. What, as a young person setting out, for some young people, yes, life can be very good. And not even just because you're getting a job. Agricultural opportunities are opening up. And I was surprised when, you know, at my dad's funeral, one of my cousins came down from Kwara, where he's not a Zimbabwean, but he's very much involved in farming and agribusiness. And so there are opportunities that people are taking up. And I think that, yes, there's a problem of jobs because we have, on the one hand, we have an entrepreneurial spirit, and on the other hand, we have, I need a job in government. And I think that the problem of Nigeria, especially when it comes to elections, is that those who think that their only hope is to get a job in government become desperate when they don't see their man there. That's a problem. To be frank, I honestly cannot say the extent to which the split is real. However, the extent to which the PDP has turned on its members because it has a feeling that nothing can happen to it, you're either in the PDP or you're dead politically, is a real one. We saw what happened to the former governor of Bayelsa State, and you know, thrown into the wilderness. We could see that the same treatment was being lined up for the governor of Rivers State, and there's a point perhaps at which that arrogance leads those who are not necessarily in the good books of the ruling clique to say, it gets to the stage, as I think it's Ben Franklin who said, gentlemen, we either all hang together or we will all assuredly hang separately. And so then they say, rather than wait to be picked off one by one, we better set the pace. So I think that aspect of it is, I mean, when you get the pettiness of, you didn't come and condole me, excuse me, I came and, no, I wasn't receiving people there, and that's just the president's wife. Oh, come on, I think that shows a level of, I don't even know how to characterize it, but when it gets to the stage where that becomes the discourse, and nothing is said, nobody is called to order, nobody is told to, excuse me, you don't dictate to people, you don't put a condolence register somewhere and then say, I was not receiving condolence visits, and you're not even in government. So I think that it shows that there's a level of personalization and bitterness, which obviously, even if the target was the River State governor, others have now seen that the writing on the wall for him is being read by the rest of us too. So I think that to that extent, it's real. As to whether or not they will make up, I think that it's really neither here nor there. What one is concerned about is that when you had the formation of the APC, there began to be discerned the possibility of a real challenge to the inevitability of a PDP victory with its incumbency and so on. And there's no doubt that the APC, notwithstanding, and it is the All Progressives Congress, it carries a lot of hope for some people. Others are saying, well, it's got this bad person in it, that bad person in it, and and so on and so forth. But the point about it was that it began, and we were, as Harold Wilson said, politics is the art of the possible. And to the extent that the APC began to be real and has been registered, it began to make politics as the art of the possible in the context of it is possible that the incumbent government can be defeated. That was an important factor. But when you now have this split in the PDP, you have this danger that the disaffected ones will simply want to transfer themselves. There was a danger at a point where the disaffected ones would want to transfer themselves and join the APC. So by the split in the PDP, there's a possibility that that danger has been avoided for the APC, because whilst I would not want to get into the issue of how pure or how progressive the APC really is, for me, its importance lies in the fact that there's a possibility that an incumbent government can be voted out. And once the Nigerian voter exercises that power, understands it as a possibility, then the politics of he can't win, we are going to be in power for 60 years, don't even bother to try, that mentality will start to change. Because, in my view, until the voter really takes the power into her hands and says, it's my vote, it's me that counts, it's what I do that's important. Until that happens, then it will be like, you know, a fight going on Mount Olympus. That we might feel the rain, but actually we're not part of the battle. We're just getting trampled by it. So, and once it happens to one incumbent government, as we've seen in Senegal, it can happen to another incumbent government. So it's not that you now take over and then you begin to relax and say, I'm here now. What have you got? No, you have to perform. You got there on the ticket, and if you don't, there's somebody who could come in and unseat you just as you unseated somebody. But we have to make that first hurdle. They've done it in Ghana, to and fro, and Nigerians will be saying, oh, how many are there, and all these things that we use to try and console ourselves for our total incompetence. But if we can make that sea change in our body politic, then we can start dealing with issues of, you know, ideology, orientation, and so on and so forth. And I don't, and I don't say that because I think that everybody either has to vote for the PDP or for the APC, because you have other parties which have always been there. And speaking as somebody who generally tends to vote for the party that didn't get, that doesn't have a chance, simply because I think they need to be encouraged, so that they say that, well, we went to the poll and nobody voted for us, we might as well give up. No, I think that especially now, and although there's a bit of confusion, but you certainly have the even new parties like the PDM also being, you know, coming up. I would not put the UPN as led by Frederick Fashow in the same category, because I think that is just a spoiler. But in other contexts, I think that the political scene is becoming quite a lively one. But I think that what I would want to see coming out of it is that there will be a genuine understanding by voters that there is a power in their vote. Now, if I had my way, I would want statesman-like behavior on the part of many people, starting with the president, moving on to General Buhari and others, to say, let me stand down. Let's have a, you know, but I'm not holding my breath, frankly. The opposition party, as I said, it's more a matter of the mindset of the voter. The voter, first of all, has to believe that they can do it. Because even if the opposition party gets its act together, if the voters are still, you know, with this, oh, there's nothing that can be done, these people will win, that they're going to rig it, blah, blah, blah. Fortunately, the Nigerian voter continues to turn out, despite the chorus of nothing can be done, they're going to write the results, there's no point, we need a military dictator to come in and all the rest of it. Despite all of that, I want to say that we have seen it done in Senegal, we've seen it done in Ghana, we've seen it done in other countries. There's really no reason why we shouldn't be able to do it, not because we are bigger or smaller or anything else, but because it's what will be good for us. And we can see that, I mean, when you speak to Ghanaians, they'll say, oh, you can't be talking about my country, it's terrible, blah, blah, blah. But we know the Nigerians are going to Ghana in droves just to attend university and so on, whereas our own universities are on strike as I'm talking to you now. You know, we can see the difference. There are things that you can come to Nigeria and you will say, oh gosh, yeah, this is really something. This is great.
What?
This is really working. Well, I mean, for me, if I come into Lagos now, I know it's a different journey. I forget the airport. We would draw the veil of courtesy or discretion or shame over the condition inside the airport. But you come out, you see that there are differences. Lagos used to be a filthy city in every sense of the word. Now it's not. And it's not just the road from the airport, by the way. It's in many different parts of the town. It's not just the parts where, you know, where the rich people go. It's inside, you know, there are places inside. And so that is improving. I'm on the board of the ZODBA's Memorial Libraries. And you will say that, well, our operations are mostly confined to Ikoyi, but there are public schools in Ikoyi, and in a way you would say that the children in the public schools have a greater need than those in the private schools, and yet I'm continually encouraged by the quality of the way that those children interact. Their educational, the government is open to people doing as we do. We set up libraries in schools, we've set up digital centers, and we also don't just put equipment there, but also the main trustee, the executive trustee, Mrs. Esiri, actually makes sure that we have youth corpus who are there to actually help the children with their reading, their access to the internet, and so on and so forth. So that all of these things are happening. I'm very excited by the Okmoimo project in Osun State, you know, the tablet education. I haven't seen it, but I think just the creativity of the thinking, or setting up factories, providing employment, and so on. I think that the potential is there, and really, in a way, there's an extent to which you almost want to say to government, what you need to do is give us the tools and get the hell out of our way. To be frank, I would say that in terms of trying to just get the police even to have a system of organization, because the job of the Police Service Commission, in theory, is to employ, discipline, and, if necessary, dismiss every police officer in the country except for the Inspector General of Police. Now, when we were appointed, there had been no Police Service Commission for 16 years. So it was very much a matter of trying to establish ourselves. Unfortunately, we were there for 5 years, beginning to get into, you know, to have a proper system of promotion, not having police officers depend solely on pleasing their immediate boss, you know, the whole mentality of suffer now and, you know, your turn to enjoy, basically by which they mean your turn to oppress will come later. But then we had a situation where the Inspectors General of Police were not necessarily very welcoming to the idea that their disciplinary powers were being overseen by a civilian body. The idea that a police officer could petition the commission directly, they didn't like it. And what happened, our term came to an end, and they replaced us with a former police officer who bought totally into that idea that a police officer, it's an act of indiscipline for a police officer to petition. So in short, instead of having something that had the potential, because the Police Service Commission under Nigerian Constitution has immense powers, but if you don't have the tools to be able to make use of them, and for us, we were, you know, to even get staff, to get somewhere to be able to have our offices and have our meetings. And of course, those of us who were there were 4 of us who were part-time members, and then there were 3 full-time members. But, you know, I think that if it had continued, if there had been some continuity, and I don't necessarily mean keeping somebody like me, but if there had been some continuity, because we had a chair, even though he was a member of the PDP, he was very much open to the idea of working with civil society, taking on board the lessons of what is done in other countries in terms of accountability and making the police actually responsive on the issue of human rights and so on. Because, and I even understand the understanding that a police officer who has to abuse your human rights is actually an inefficient police officer. It means that the only tool that they have in their kit is a hammer, and therefore they have to hammer everybody because they don't have any training in how to be subtle. They certainly don't have any forensic capacity, and so on and so forth. So all of those things that are there's a potential for them. They go by the way because you've now succeeded the civilian with an ex-policeman, and when his term ended, you actually got a former Inspector General of Police to come and chair the Police Service Commission. That basically is the end of that body as an effective tool for civilian oversight, because a former Inspector General of Police will never see anything wrong with the idea of the police, and it's a big surprise and actually a shock to me that the President could have made such a gross error in appointing a former Inspector General of Police, not to talk of a former police officer, to head the Police Service Commission. The thing is that, you see, most of us who are legal practitioners, we're just doing ordinary cases. There's no political angle to them. We just go to court and we do our jobs, and you'd be surprised at the number of judges who also just go to court and do their job. And it's easy at every time something happens to say that this judge must have taken money or this one must be corrupt and so on. I mean, let's take, for example, the recent case of Al-Mustafa, which is now on appeal to the Supreme Court. The fact is that you have an appeal system precisely because judges can make mistakes. They can make genuine mistakes, and they can make deliberate mistakes. Now, those who are on one side will say that the judge at the High Court made a deliberate mistake. Those who are on the other side will say that the judges at the Court of Appeal made a deliberate mistake. I personally think that there is a good argument, certainly for the decision of the High Court. But I can also see that there may be reasons why the Court of Appeal saw it differently. We must hope that the Supreme Court will do better, but I would not necessarily say that it's because of political or even corruption. I think that there's no doubt that, how can I say, one only hears it, that some judges will take money. But I think that the unfortunate thing is the number of those who are doing their everyday job, get everybody now who is not satisfied comes out and says that the judge is corrupt. And I think that's a bit lazy on our part as lawyers. I'm not saying that judges cannot be corrupt. I'm not even saying that lawyers cannot be corrupting influences. And one would be deluding oneself if one felt that it's only very senior, discreet lawyers who can be involved in that. On the contrary, one can say enough to say that often it is fairly junior lawyers who are used for such purposes. So you really cannot say. But I think that in the end, we can just talk and talk, or we can produce proof. Otherwise, we have to go on. I mean, it's either that we're going to go to court or we're not. But I think that if we just talk and say everybody is corrupt, then all you do is bring the whole system into disrepute, when the whole system actually is not disreputable. And at the same time, you don't actually offer any solution, you don't offer anything better. So I think that when a judge does something, yes, it should be critiqued. And it can be critiqued on legal grounds. But I think that simply just saying corrupt all the time, I don't think it helps. And actually, to the extent that we've been saying it, I don't think it's made any difference, because judges who are corrupt will be corrupt. And certainly some of them have been called to account. And under the present Chief Justice, there's certainly more of the feeling that judges need to be on their game. When the Chief Justice of Nigeria talked about bail as something that appears to be available to the highest bidder, that was a warning. And one should hope that, it's a bit like, you know, who comes next, but one should hope that that approach will be sustained, because I think that her stance has made some people feel, I have to be a bit careful. Well, I mean, it's something, you apply for it.
Okay.
So you have to apply to become a senior advocate. And I believe the criteria have changed now. When I was actively involved in applying, you had to have a certain number of cases at the Supreme Court, at the Court of Appeal, or the High Court, and in the last 3 years. Now I understand that it's no longer, there's no time limit as long as you can. But I think that in the end, the cream will rise to the top, so that senior advocates, even when I was a fairly young lawyer, there were those that we felt really had the goods and those who just had the number of cases. And I think it will still be the same today. However, I do know that because the title is alleged to mean that this one is excellent in their profession and this one is not, that some lawyers will say that, you know, I had to go and apply because I had clients from overseas and they were told that you have to get a senior advocate. Even though, I'm trying to remember, I've done cases, even when I was fairly young, that would do cases against senior advocates and would come out victorious. So it doesn't mean that being a senior advocate means that you are bound to win your case. But some, you know, there it is. Definitely women have access, but I think it's wrong to say African society and assume that African society means that women are all treated the same all over the continent, or all over Nigeria, for that matter. I mean, if you take the Yoruba in the Southwest, the wars that we were fighting in the 19th century actually left women with a lot of positions, simply because that, I don't know, I wouldn't call it chivalry, but the idea that you don't attack women allowed them to be moving around and trading, whilst the men were slaughtering each other and selling each other off as slaves, you know, being sent wholesale to Brazil. So you cannot say to be African means that you automatically must be an oppressor of women, because it's not true. And a lot of the idea of oppressing women comes in through other societies. I mean, if you read the book Marriage in Lagos, you will see that when the British came and introduced their idea of monogamy, people did feel that it was oppressive to women, because they were now expected to sit at home drinking tea instead of going out, making their own money and earning their own living and being responsible for themselves. It was seen only through the prism of, is this a polygamous society or is it monogamous? And the assumption was made that if it's a polygamous, then women automatically have a lower status. But I wouldn't say that that is so. I think that one has to understand a different context. At the same time, I think that for example, we had High Court judges in Nigeria before they had them in the United Kingdom. There are more women judges in Lagos State than there are male judges. So there's no pretense, there's no doubt that women have entree into many things, and merely the fact of the position of the Minister of Finance, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. People don't waste time saying, "Oh, this because she's a woman, she's not." What does it mean? It's irrelevant. Is she doing the job or is she not doing the job? Any society should have more women than men, and we don't. There's a reason for that. So definitely, the job. It's just that it's not only a woman's problem. It's everybody's problem. We need to recognize that. And so it's not to say that when you have a woman, you should ask her about women's rights. You should ask men about women's rights too, because it's their problem too.
And I guess we should ask women about men's rights too. I mean, about
Human
rights. Wow. On that note, I want to thank you so much for your time and coming on SaharaTV once again. By the way, I should say that even now, you do not look bad at all.
Keep on. Well, I'm
so
happy
much.
to have at last made it into the studios of Sahara Television.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.